Yeah, I love that question. I love it because going back to what you said in the beginning of this conversation, how when people hear the word conflict, it's like, it's almost like repellent, because it brings up so much. There's just so much there. And it is a tool. It's probably one of the most powerful tools that we have access to, should we choose to see it that way. And in particularly, something that I've come to learn is that, triggers are, they're information, you know, when we get triggered and you get triggered in conflict, or you get triggered in tension, when you get triggered and you're anxious, like this is like across the bat. Triggers are important um, information givers that should you choose to explore them, give you a lot of information about what's happening within you. Meaning, triggers. Go
How
ahead.
do you recognize what's a trigger? I wanted to mention that before you go into
Oh, yeah,
a
that's a
lot
good
of
question.
really great stuff about triggers. It may not be clear
Yeah,
how to recognize them.
yeah. Triggers are, how do you explain this? Because everyone experiences it differently. Uh, I can go back to that feeling of when we were talking about how do you know there's conflict when it's not really like overt. And I was saying how like the energy can just feel off. Um, Sometimes a trigger can be just that. Like, I mean, I couldn't even tell you how many times I've been triggered or not realized in the moment that I'm triggered, and I find myself like hours, if not days later, fixating on this thing that happened that I didn't realize like impacted me till later, because that does happen. Um, and so, triggers can show up in that way. They can be something that uh, it's almost like if you think there's like a timer and like the timer hasn't gone off yet. And then you go back and you're like, huh, I didn't like the way I felt when that person said that to me. And I'm like, and then you go through a whole story of like, oh, am I being sensitive or am I being, because that happens too. Especially when I find that happens with a lot of people, especially when triggers, they don't realize they were triggered until much later. They'll oftentimes second guess themselves and second guess their experience because it didn't happen in the moment. So they're trying to like reason away, probably is the best way to describe it. Um, which I would say if you're doing that, like just I would stop because a trigger is a trigger and it's information. If you look at it in a very neutral lens of a trigger being something that's informing you of an experience happening at a deeper level than is in your awareness. That's probably the best way to describe a trigger.